A family mom, dad, and their 10-year-old daughter sets out for a weekend camping trip on a popular trail in a national park. After sending one message, they vanish without a trace. No signs, no clues, nothing. For 9 years, their disappearance becomes a campfire mystery. Then a storm uproots an old tree, and beneath it, their bodies are found. Not lost hikers, but victims of something far darker, each with the same chilling wound to the back of the head. This isn't a story about getting lost in the wild. It's about what the wild can hide. The events began in September 2014. The Great Smoky Mountains autumn offers ideal conditions for hiking. The atmosphere is crisp, the summer warmth recedes, while trees initiate their color transformation. Inspired by this perfect timing, the Bennett family opted for a brief 2-day journey. At 42 years old, John, the family patriarch, was no extreme survivalist, but his hiking expertise was well honed due to his civil engineer background that instilled meticulous planning and checking habits. His wife Eileen, aged 39, worked at a local library, finding serenity in nature rather than thrill. Their 10-year-old daughter Abby, full of energy, had recently developed an affinity for the exciting tales she encountered in books. This was not their inaugural hike together. However, this trail proved to be slightly more formidable. Their objective was to traverse the Big Creek Trail, stay at campsite number 37 overnight, and return the subsequent day. On a familiar, if not particularly simple trail, the Bennett family embarked, posing no immediate danger. Yearly, countless individuals navigated this route. September 20th, Saturday morning, found them at Big Creek Trailhead's parking lot, leaving their silver SUV behind. Investigators would piece together their final steps using footage from town exits and receipts later. They fueled up at a gas station, purchasing water and trail snacks. Nothing out of the ordinary. John, as usual, meticulously checked all items: tent, sleeping bags, food, first aid kit, map, and compass. Eileen carried a fully charged phone and portable battery pack. Prepared, they were ready. They were last spotted by fellow hikers commencing their own journey. These observers described the Bennett family as ordinary, content, eager for the weekend's adventure. The father was explaining something to his daughter, gesturing at the map, while the mother adjusted her backpack. 10 o'clock in the morning found them venturing into the forest, where Big Creek adorned the path initially. The landscape was beautiful, clear waters flowing beside towering boulders. An hour into the hike, Eileen pulled out her phone, managing to connect just enough to send a message to her sister Sarah. The message read, "At the river, all good, miss you." Receiving it, Sarah smiled and put her phone aside, anticipating another update upon their return. However, that was the last message from Eileen Bennett's device. No contact was made with anyone else. By Sunday evening, Sarah still hadn't received a call. Initially, she wasn't concerned. They might have been delayed, or her phone could have run out of battery in the mountains. But Monday morning brought a sense of unease. An ominous stillness filled the airwaves. Sarah phoned John at work. He wasn't present. She also contacted the school where Abby should have been, but she too was absent. Her heart sinking, she reached out to the National Park Rescue Service. The car began to move. Upon arrival, the rangers inspected the Big Creek Trailhead parking lot, and the Bennett's silver SUV remained parked as they had left it. This confirmed that the family had not emerged from the woods. A large-scale search operation commenced. Many rangers and volunteers participated in the initial days, scouring the area from the trailhead to their presumed campsite. The weather cooperated, raising hopes. Investigators questioned all hikers who were on the trail during that weekend. Some recalled observing a family walking up the trail. No one reported anything alarming. They arrived at campsite number 37. It was a common forest clearing suitable for camping. No trace of the Bennetts was found. Absent were any footprints from a tent, remains of a campfire, or other indications connecting to them. It seemed as though they had never been there at all. Search dogs tracked their path from the parking lot, followed it steadfastly for approximately 2 miles, and then, by the river, the trail mysteriously vanished. It didn't veer into the forest or lead towards the water. It simply disappeared. The dog handlers threw up their hands in bewilderment. They had seldom witnessed such a phenomenon. It was as if people had vanished into nothingness. Helicopters hovered over the forest, but the dense foliage offered scant visibility. Searchers blared their names through megaphones. No reply echoed back. Week after week went by. The search perimeter was broadened. The National Guard became part of the operation. They scoured square upon square, even in the most challenging terrains like steep slopes and gorges. They looked for signs of a fall, landslides, or any other clues that might suggest an accident. In the forest, there was an eerie stillness. Investigators were left pondering various theories. Was it a premeditated disappearance? Were they experiencing financial troubles? A thorough examination of their accounts revealed no significant debts and a consistent income flow. No large sums of money were withdrawn prior to the trip. Their home remained undisturbed, groceries in the fridge, future plans marked on the calendar. Those about to disappear don't typically exhibit such behavior. Crucially, they wouldn't have abandoned their car. They wouldn't have just taken camping equipment and left their loved ones behind in the dark. The ransom kidnapping theory also failed to hold up. No calls were received, no ransom demands made. Their financial status ruled out them being targeted by professional criminals. This left only one unpalatable possibility. They encountered someone in the woods who harmed them. No leads were discovered. No accounts of suspicious figures in the vicinity at that moment. No indications of a fight. If they had been assaulted, why weren't their possessions taken? Backpacks filled with food, tools, and wallets, all seemingly abandoned somewhere. Yet nothing was uncovered. Following several months, the extensive search was terminated, as is customary. It's not feasible to keep numerous individuals in the woods indefinitely. The Bennett family was thus categorized as missing. This development proved disastrous for their relatives. There were no corpses, no explanations, merely a void and excruciating doubt. Eileen's sibling, Sarah, persistently coordinated volunteer teams for quite some time. They repeatedly ventured into the Great Smoky Mountains, retracing the same paths, examining beneath each bush. However, their efforts bore no fruit. Years elapsed. The Bennett family's tale transformed into a local folklore. They were highlighted in newspapers and regional news segments. Photos of them adorned bulletin boards at park visitor centers, yet time obliterates all. Fresh tragedies and events supplanted the old, collecting dust in the archives. 9 years elapsed, a span hard to fathom. 9 years of vacancy. For 9 years, Sarah and her kin harbored an emptiness. For 9 years, their cherished ones were neither living nor dead. They existed within the purgatory of missing. It appeared that no resolution was forthcoming. The forest had claimed them, never to return. Nevertheless, in May 2023, nature devised alternative plans. A tempestuous storm, complete with hurricane-like winds, ravaged the area. These storms are termed windfalls. So potent was the wind that it shattered and uprooted trees centuries old. Among these felled giants stood a venerable oak on Mount Sterling's precipice, secluded from the main trail and seldom visited wilderness. Under the fury of nature, this colossus eventually succumbed. The extensive root system, entangled with soil and rocks, was exposed upside down, creating a vast crater. A park ranger, during his routine inspection post-hurricane, found an unusual sight within this crater concealed under a thick blanket of flipped roots. Initially, he failed to comprehend its nature. Rags and light-colored items stood out against the dark earth. He advanced closer, feeling a chill run through him. They were human remains. The area was quickly sealed off. The discovering ranger adhered to specific guidelines. He relayed the situation via radio, using coded terms, contacted the senior park detective, and requested backup from the county sheriff's department. Within hours, professionals started gathering at the secluded Mount Sterling slope. Access was challenging due to the lack of a direct road. Forensic specialists and investigators had to traverse several miles over rugged terrain while carrying heavy gear. The striped tape strung between trees seemed misplaced amidst this untamed woodland. It demarcated what was now recognized as a crime scene. Overseeing it all stood a colossal oak tree, uprooted and wrenched from its soil. Its sprawling root system appeared like a massive bony appendage suspended in the air, seemingly having just revealed its dreadful secret. The tasks commenced under a heavy silence. interrupted only by camera clicks and soft orders. The excavation procedure was meticulous and laborious. Forensic anthropologists used brushes and miniature shovels to clear centimeter by centimeter, freeing the remains from the earth and the small roots that had grown over them in 9 years. As they continued to clear the area, a more grotesque image surfaced before their eyes. This was not typical of remains found in the woods. The bodies were not hastily thrown into a pit. Instead, they were arranged. The term arranged would later appear in all reports. 3 individuals, an adult male, an adult female, and a child, were discovered in an unusually confined position. This locale might have been a pre-existing depression beneath the tree roots, or excavated specifically for this purpose. Their limbs displayed sharp bends, their spines contorted to minimize space. The bodies seemed to be meticulously folded together, resembling assembled parts of a construction set into a compact unit. One investigator would later comment off-record that it appeared as if someone had attempted to cram them into a suitcase that was excessively small. This methodical care, this peculiar, almost ritualistic neatness was the most unsettling aspect. It eliminated any possibility of burial by a landslide or other natural occurrence. Someone had deliberately arranged them in this fashion. Remnants of rotten fabric from clothing were also discovered alongside the bones. Artificial hiking apparel fared better than natural counterparts in this case. Forensic specialists retrieved a fragment of a blue windbreaker, a children's size 10 boot sole, and assorted fleece scraps. These items offered no definitive evidence, but they corresponded to the clothing description worn by the Bennetts on their hiking trip 8 years prior. A corroded multi-tool was also uncovered beside the male skeleton, along with a liquefied plastic water bottle in its pocket remains. However, nothing else was found. No backpacks, tents, sleeping bags, or cooking pots, all essential gear for an overnight camp. The scene suggested they were deprived of everything useful, save their clothing. This lent credence to the idea that this incident transcended an ordinary accident. The findings were delicately packed and forwarded to a forensic lab for investigation. Initially, it was essential to establish definitive identities. Although the circumstantial evidence strongly suggested the Bennetts, conclusive proof was required. Dental records of John and Eileen were obtained for comparison, which resulted in a perfect match. To confirm the remains of the children, a DNA sample was taken from Sarah, Eileen's sister. After a few weeks, the results were returned, leaving no room for doubt that the remains discovered beneath the uprooted oak tree were those of John, Eileen, and 10-year-old Abby Bennett. The wait of 9 years for their family ended. Uncertainty was replaced by grim certainty. A brief official phone call marked the end of their hopes, simultaneously opening a new, even more ominous chapter in this story. Their loved ones were found. However, the primary question shifted from where they are to what befell them. The answer to that question turned out to be far more horrifying than anyone could have envisioned. In the quietude of the lab, a forensic anthropologist scrutinized 3 skulls meticulously. An intriguing finding, crucial to the investigation's trajectory, emerged. Each of these skulls bore an identical injury at the back. Not a fracture from falling, nor shatters due to stone blows, but a single clear, near-circular hole approximately 3 centimeters wide. This damage was inflicted with immense force by something heavy, blunt, and possessing a concentrated striking surface, possibly a hammer or a carefully chosen stone. The location of the wound at the base of the skull indicated that the victims were likely unaware of their attacker. They were attacked stealthily from behind without any warning. What made this discovery chilling was the uniformity of the injuries, the same modus operandi, the same impact point. The assailant acted calculatingly, systematically, and precisely. First 1, then 2, then 3. Initially targeted due to his strength, John had no opportunity to safeguard his family. The expert's verdict unequivocally pointed towards triple homicide. The case shifted from missing persons to missing persons with suspected foul play, instantly transforming it into an investigation of 3 murders that occurred 9 years prior. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, in collaboration with the Sheriff's Office and National Park Rangers, established a specialized task force. They retrieved the old Dusty Bennett case file from the archives, scrutinizing all reports, statements, and maps of search areas again under the new grim revelations. Previously, they were searching for signs of missing tourists. Now they sought traces of a murderer. Gradually, that ominous presence surfaced from the shroud of time. Interviews with tourists conducted in September 2014 mentioned a solitary man repeatedly. At the time, no importance was attached to this detail. The Great Smoky Mountains are perpetually populated by solitary travelers. Descriptions were hazy. A middle-aged man, clad in unremarkable outdoor garb and carrying a bulky backpack, was spotted. He didn't converse with anyone and deliberately avoided eye contact. A pair of tourists recollected seeing him on a Saturday evening close to campsite number 37, the same site the Bennetts were planning to visit. He was found seated on a log by the stream, merely gazing at the water. When they greeted him and said hello, he merely nodded briefly without lifting his gaze. In 2014, he was simply another tourist. In 2023, he transformed into the primary suspect, an entity with no name and no face. Investigators understood that locating him 9 years later would be almost impossible. They had nothing but this indistinct image. It appeared as though the killer, similar to his victims, had disintegrated into the woodland, leaving behind only cleanly arranged bones beneath a tree's roots and an enigma unsolvable. Yet, they were unaware that the ghost had left another trace in another location at another time. Despite the solidifying evidence in the Bennett case, the investigation failed to pick up speed and instead stumbled almost immediately at a standstill. The task force had established a method of murder, an approximate time and location, but were missing the crucial component, a suspect. The spectral figure glimpsed by tourists 9 years prior remained nothing more than a ghostly apparition. Investigators re-questioned anyone they could locate. However, after nearly a decade, what can a person truly recall? Memories lose their clarity, details become vague. The individual was of average height, neither young nor old, and carrying a backpack. Many fit that description. They scrutinized thousands of credit card transactions at outdoor stores, motels, and gas stations within hundreds of miles of the national park during that time frame. No matches were found. The killer likely operated with cash, leaving no electronic trace. He seemed as elusive and untraceable as the wilderness where he carried out his crime. Weeks turned into months, but the killer remained hidden. The Bennett case teetered on the brink of becoming a cold case, this time involving a triple homicide. It weighed heavily on investigators' desks, serving as a stark reminder of their failures. One tenacious detective from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation opted for an unconventional approach. If the trail had grown cold on land, he would search it in cyberspace. He elected to seek assistance from VICAP, the federal database, or the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program operated by the FBI. This expansive system allows law enforcement agencies nationwide to input data on unsolved violent crimes. The objective is to identify patterns and link cases that initially seem dissimilar. The detective painstakingly filled out the form, meticulously entering every unique and peculiar detail of the Bennett case. Victims, a family group consisting of a man, woman, and child. Crime scene, a secluded trail within a national park. Weapon, a heavy focused object. Death cause, a solitary, precise strike to the back of the skull. Operating method, bodies meticulously concealed in abnormal, folded postures. Stolen items included camping essentials of the victims. He activated the search function with minimal hopes. Such queries seldom produce instant results. However, this time the system indicated a match swiftly. One match. This indicator led to the opposite end of the country, to Washington State, and to another era, 2018, 4 years post the Bennett's disappearance. There, in the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest, a 22-year-old student named Mark Renshaw had vanished. He embarked on a solo 5-day hike and never resurfaced. His vehicle was found in the parking lot at the trailhead. A comprehensive search operation was initiated, much like the one carried out in the Great Smoky Mountains. The results were identical, yielding no findings. Neither the corpse nor the equipment was discovered. A year following Mark Renshaw's disappearance, his death was classified as an accident in the mountains. However, 2 hunters off the beaten tourist path unexpectedly found his remains hidden beneath a large rock and covered with foliage in a hollow. Washington state forensic experts performing an autopsy subsequently uncovered a puzzling detail. Mark Renshaw's skull bore a single precise skull fracture at the back of his head. His high-priced backpack, tent, and gear were never located. The revelation left Tennessee investigators astounded, as the correlation was clear and spine-chilling. They were not dealing with two unrelated crimes happening thousands of miles apart over 4 years. They were investigating the actions of a singular individual. This person appeared to be a serial killer, preying on tourists in national parks and forests. The newfound information provided them with fresh leads. Investigators managed to construct a preliminary psychological profile of the unidentified suspect, who is likely a transient man with a nomadic lifestyle. He navigates effortlessly throughout the country without a fixed abode and possesses skills of an experienced hiker, possibly a former military personnel or simply someone drawn to nature over society. His expertise includes survival in forests, stealthy movement, and concealing evidence of his crimes. Initially, it seems robbery is his motive as he targets high-quality tourist equipment. However, the ruthless and meticulous manner of the killings, coupled with a peculiar custom of burying victims, suggests he is not just a thief. This individual is a predator who considers murder an integral part of his process. He leaves no survivors and eliminates all traces of his victims from the earth. Detectives in Tennessee promptly collaborated with their counterparts in Washington state, making it a joint investigation. Investigating Mark Renshaw's case, there was one clue that the Bennetts didn't possess: a slim lead to pursue. A few days following Mark's disappearance in 2018, an individual visited a small second-hand store in a town close to the national forest. He sold nearly new, costly backpack and tent corresponding to the description of the missing student's gear. The shop owner, an elderly man, recollected him distinctly. It was odd that someone would sell top-notch equipment at such a low price. Despite his reservations, he didn't ask any questions and paid in cash, without disclosing his identity. However, there was an old security camera positioned above the cash register in the shop. The recording quality was poor, but it captured him, a middle-aged man with a weathered face wearing a simple cap. He resembled any other resident or tourist of the area, yet he was the sole picture of their elusive figure in all these years. For numerous hours, forensic experts and digital image specialists labored over the footage, enhancing its quality and discerning his distinct features. The improved image was then cross-checked against every conceivable federal and local database. They employed facial recognition software, comparing it to photos on driver's licenses and mugshots. Numerous potential matches were found, but most led nowhere. After several fruitless weeks, the system finally yielded a match with an 87% likelihood. The image was from the Oregon State Police database of misdemeanor offenders. The man in the photo had been arrested 5 years prior for vagrancy. His identity was Randall Clark. His background corresponded perfectly to the profile. He was 58, without significant convictions, only minor crimes such as shoplifting, drunkenness, and vagrancy. He had no permanent job or fixed address. Instead, he traveled across the western United States, taking on seasonal jobs in logging and farming. Essentially, he was a nomad, largely invisible. Since 2014, the ghost's general demeanor fit the blurry descriptions given by tourists in the Great Smoky Mountains. By now, the elusive figure had a known identity: Randall Clark. The past 9 years of tracking a vague presence transformed into a quest for one specific individual. The central query shifted from who to where is he currently. Authorities disseminated Clark's name and picture nationwide, along with an arrest warrant. However, locating him was as futile as capturing smoke. Investigators dealt with a man who had intentionally vanished from the contemporary world. For the last 15 years, he lacked any credit history. His driver's license was inactive. He had no social media presence. He owned no properties and rented none. Living on cash and temporary jobs, Clark moved around the country like a tumbleweed. Investigators acknowledged that traditional search strategies would be ineffective given his peculiar lifestyle. Instead, they concentrated on understanding his way of life. Investigators surmised that he'd linger near wilderness areas, utilizing small towns adjacent to national parks and forests as bases. These locations offered him opportunities to restock supplies, secure temporary work, and vanish once more. Warnings were disseminated to secondhand goods stores, pawn shops, bars, and diners along highways in numerous similar western U.S. towns. Authorities interrogated seasonal workers and ranch owners. However, Clark appeared to anticipate the risk. He went underground. No updates surfaced for several months. The task force remained on alert, scrutinizing every potential lead, regardless of its potential importance. They fretted he might have retreated into the wilderness for an extended period, or even worse, identified a fresh target. But the tip arrived from an unlikely source. It originated from a public library in a small Montana town close to the Idaho border. The elderly library caretaker, a woman, routinely checked the daily news alerts from the sheriff's office via email. She recognized the description of an individual named Clark, as this seemingly harmless, unkempt man had been a near-daily visitor for 3 weeks. He never borrowed books. Instead, he would sit at the most remote table, engrossed in old newspapers or simply gazing out the window for hours on end. Occasionally, he'd use the public computer, but his activities were limited to browsing news sites rather than checking emails or social media. She, with her keen visual memory, found him exceptionally unremarkable, yet somehow familiar. Upon comparing Clark's appearance in the bulletin to her mental image, she was certain. With trembling hands, she dialed 911. The apprehension was swift and uneventful, devoid of any fanfare or pursuit. 2 deputies from the local sheriff's office and 2 FBI agents stationed in the area entered the library, finding Clark seated at his table. Upon their approach, he raised his gaze to them, showing no sign of shock or fear. Instead, there was a solemn acceptance in his eyes, as if he had long anticipated this day. He rose without a word and extended his wrists for the handcuffs. The 9-year manhunt for the elusive figure of the Great Smoky Mountains came to an end among the bookshelves in the peaceful confines of a rural library. Randall Clark was transported to the nearest FBI headquarters for interrogation. For the initial hours, he remained silent, facing 2 seasoned investigators and only gazing at the table. He neither requested legal representation nor posed any queries. He was as immovable as a stone. The investigators then presented their evidence systematically, displaying a map of the Great Smoky Mountains and inquiring whether he had been there in September 2014. Investigators presented a photo of the Bennett family, joyful and beaming, snapped moments before their final trek. Yet, he failed to respond. Instead, the conversation steered towards Mark Renshaw's case. A map of Washington State's national forest was displayed next. Lastly, they positioned a frame from that blurry store recording onto the table. There was Randall Clark selling the slain student's backpack. Upon viewing this, he glanced up and addressed the investigators for the first time. His confession lacked emotion, sounding almost clinical. He discussed the double murder as one might describe engine repair. There was no sorrow, boasting, or regret in his words. Instead, he provided facts. He admitted to having a deep affinity for the wilderness and viewing other tourists as unwelcomed intruders, amateur survivalists in flashy attire and costly equipment. His disdain was evident. At times, he'd observe them from afar. Occasionally, when resources or upgraded gear were required, he selected his prey. He trailed individuals for a day or two, observing their travel patterns and routines, biding time until their defenseless moment arrived. The Bennetts were the latest to cross his path. He shadowed them, maintaining a distance. By the river, they stopped to rest. His opportunity came when they unwound. John Bennett ventured towards the water, while Eileen and Abby arranged their belongings on a blanket. They faced away from the forest. From behind and without sound, he approached. In his hand, a stone from the riverbed, a constant companion in his backpack pocket, served as his weapon. With swift strokes, he struck John, then Eileen, leaving Abby no chance to utter a scream. The attack lasted less than a minute. Subsequently, he dragged the bodies one by one, further into the forest to an ancient oak tree with a natural cavity at its base. He detailed his method of storing them inside for space conservation and preventing animal access. He discussed it much like explaining the correct way to arrange firewood. Following this, he picked up their backpacks laden with food, tent, and sleeping bags, and departed. For several months, he utilized the gear until it wore out, at which point he discarded it in another state. The story involving Mark Renhow in Washington was nearly identical. He trailed a solitary individual boasting impressive equipment, murdered him for his possessions. A pragmatic predator, Clark's full confession, corroborated by details only the murderer could know, brought an end to both cases. Charged with 5 murders and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, the 9-year enigma surrounding the Bennett family's disappearance was finally resolved. No further queries emerged about their ordeal, as relative Sarah, who endured years teetering between hope and despair, found no solace. The conclusion arrived, yet it offered no respite, merely the stark, unsparing truth. The fiend that plundered her kin was not a legendary forest dweller, nor a natural element, but simply a man carrying a stone in his pouch, and hollowed-out eyes, treading the same path, breathing the same air, gazing at the same trees. This, however, was the most chilling revelation of this entire tale, that often the deadliest threat lurking in the forest bears an uncanny resemblance to oneself.